In today's video, I'm going to show you my Fujifilm Acros film simulation hack. What's up, everyone? Thanks for joining me as always. Now, before we get into it, I don't usually do this, but I'm going to say, please subscribe to the channel. Gently press that like button. You don't need to smash it. And make sure you comment on this video. A lot of you have been watching my videos, which is awesome. I appreciate it. But so small amount of you have been subscribing that it's getting a little depressing, not going to lie. So please go ahead, subscribe to the channel if you like what I'm doing here. Help me to grow. Help me to continue making videos like this. Okay, enough of that. Just so you know, I will actually go and refine my Fujifilm film simulation photos lots of times. Not all the time, but lots of times. So if I take an image in Classic Chrome or in Acros or in one of the other awesome film sims, I will import that into Capture One and actually tweak it a little bit. Now, sometimes it's just a minor tweak, sometimes it's nothing, and sometimes, as with the Acros JPEGs, I will do a pretty substantial tweak on it, but that's nothing that's crazy or hard to do. So that's what I want to show you. It's very easy and manageable to do. So we're going to take a look at my screen, and we're going to go through some images, and I'm going to just process them and show you exactly how I do it. Now, if you're using Lightroom, this is all the same kind of stuff. You can do all this stuff in Lightroom. The sliders and whatever are going to be in different spots, but it's not like you're not going to be able to do what I'm going to show you today in Lightroom. So don't worry. You don't have to have Capture One, although I do recommend Capture One if you're using Fuji because they tend to process the images and deal with them better. At least that's the consensus, and that's kind of has been my experience in the few times that I have used Lightroom with Fuji images. Okay, let's take a look. So I'm going to show you some images. These were all taken in black and white, Acros. Usually I use Acros plus G. Sometimes I use one of the other filters, but Acros is my favorite film sim. I love it. And look at how awesome this looks right out of the camera. This is exactly unedited, untouched. Now I'm going to show you my sliders here. You can see nothing has been changed. But what I like to do to really pump up the drama in my Acros images, especially now this particular one doesn't look flat really, but sometimes they feel a little flat to me. And you know, that could just be the way you expose the image. So what I like to do is I like to go in and make a few small tweaks. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually go to our levels right here. And you could see I have, this is your blacks and your whites on your histogram. And I'm actually going to start pulling in this slider. And you could see immediately what happens is that the blacks become much more stark, right? And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in the highlights slider, and it's going to make the whites pop just a little bit. So this is generally where I begin. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do, because this isn't really quite where I want it, is I actually like to lift the shadows. So check it out. I'm going to lift the shadows, which will flatten it out a little bit and give you a little bit more detail. But then in order to bring back some of the drama, I will then bring down the blacks. And I find that this technique of lifting the shadows a bit and bringing down the blacks tends to give it that little bit extra drama without crushing the blacks too much. Because if you pull this slider too much, look what happens, right? The blacks get crushed. It's the same thing as if you pull this level slider in too much. You're going to crush the blacks. So I find that if we lift the shadows a bit and we bring down the blacks, it doesn't crush them. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to play with the highlights slider. But the only thing you got to be careful about here is that if you pull this down too much, it kind of muddies the water, if you know what I mean. Like, look at the sky. For me, the sky doesn't look good now. It looks a little bit on the muddy side here. It did bring back some detail, but I'm just not a fan of that particular look. And I want some bright whites in my image. So here's what I'll do in that case. I will actually tweak the contrast slider. So look what happens. And now contrast, you got to be real careful with because it will quickly crush all your blacks. You'll lose detail. So I'll just go maybe 5%, continue to take out some shadows. get that contrast up just a touch more. Then sometimes I'll even tweak the exposure a little bit. Like on this particular image, I might bring the exposure up just a touch. And you see that's moving everything around. So there's no one way or scientific way to do this. This is just a general process that you have to play with to get the image where you like it. And now that I pulled the whites up a little bit, then I can bring the highlights down just a touch, and then I feel like it's still got enough white detail, you know, that it doesn't feel like I flattened it out too much. And I probably will even do this a little bit more here. See how I'm brightening the sky now? If I pull this histogram, this level in on the on the whites, and there you go, something like that. That's it. That's what I do. So let's take a look at before and after. And you'll see before, it looks good. But you see, if you look at the before versus the after, check it out. Like I really pumped up the drama. And the thing that I didn't do that you'll notice is I didn't use the slider that we all tend to use too much, which is the clarity slider. Like I didn't just move that up because then it gets to be a little bit processed looking. This still looks sort of natural to me. And now you could see that before it sort of looks flat in comparison to this. And I went a little bit maybe overboard here. So then what I'll do is I'll do like an A and B, like, you know, before and after, like I'm doing. And then I'll tweak it even a little bit more. But I really like how I went from here, which was a great image straight out of camera, and it has its own vibe, to this where it's like really, really pulled the drama out. So there you go. Let me show you a couple more images. Now, these images, this was taken at the Django, which is a jazz club in New York, at a show I went to when I was testing the X106. So my video on that versus the XT5 you can check out if you haven't. But these are two of my buddies, great jazz musicians. And this, the same thing, I just felt like, man, it's a little flat. So I'm going to do the exact same process. And now you're going to see, now look at my histogram here. So you could see I underexposed it. That's why all of the information is on this side. So on this side of the histogram are your blacks. On this side of the histogram are your whites. This is your exposure. This is darks versus lights is probably the right way to say that. So if all your information is crammed into this corner, this means you underexpose the image. But I didn't want to blow out their skin tones. So what I'll do here is really the same thing. I'm going to pull in this slider. I still want to crush the blacks ever so slightly. So we're going to crush them. And then we're going to pull out the shadows. Check that out. So if I pull up the shadows, you know, we retain a lot of the detail that was in there. And then that'll give me room to crush this a little bit more. And then this particular image really wants some contrast. So I'm going to definitely add some contrast. Pull up more shadows, pull down the blacks ever so slightly. Oh, too much. And then I'll pull this back just a touch. Now, what I'm looking at as I do this is primarily their faces, right? And especially this guy here, Sam. His face is really he is the subject, right? So I'm going to tweak it based on my subject. Now, when we tweak the contrast, you'll see again, it's going to crush it a little bit. So we'll pull out even more. And then sometimes this middle slider will be your midtones. And sometimes I'll tweak this a little bit too. But I really want the white. I want the brights to pop too. Like I don't want it to be too flat. And so that's why we're going to pull out some of the shadow. And then sometimes, like I said, I'll just tweak the exposure ever so slightly. So check it out. Let's do a before and after. Look at that. There's your before. Here's your after. See that? So now you can see before is kind of flat. It's kind of underexposed. And this brings up another important detail for those of you who are learning and haven't been doing this for a long time. It's better to underexpose an image than to overexpose it, right? And the reason why is because if you underexpose, you could, like, check it out, put the shadow slider back. You can lift the shadows and pull out a lot of detail. You cannot do nearly as much with the highlights. You see, if I pull the highlights in, I get some more detail, but you can't get it nearly as much as you can get it when you, if you underexpose and pull it up. That's why we photographers tend to underexpose. All right, let's look at another one. Here's another one from that same gig. Same thing here. See, his face just looks a little flat to me, right? And this is Andrew, and he's the subject here. And there was a light obviously shining on Sam's face in the background, but I want Andrew to pop more. So I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to pull in these levels, sliders. And again, because the blacks are already crushed, I'm not going to go as far here. But I'm going to do the same thing, lift the shadows, and you can see you can pull out a lot of detail there. Then I'm going to pull down the blacks. And on this one, I'm going to pull out the highlights because I want less highlight. And you can see it's not doing much, right? Check it out. Watch. Highlights up, highlights down. Didn't do much. But I want less of a highlight on the background. And here I can really start to crush the blacks. And this is, again, we do this by eye. It's not, there's not a scientific approach other than these are the sliders that I use. But then I'll get it somewhere like this. And here's your before, looks flat. Here's your after, got a nice pop to it. And I like my black and white images to really pop. I want to see a lot of contrast in them. That's the way that I like them to look. Okay, let's do another one. So this is my buddy Wayne. Wayne came to me for some portraits recently, and this is Acros. One other thing I'm going to say that I forgot to mention is these are actually RAW files I'm working with. So if you import your RAW files into Capture One, and you've taken them in a film sim, Capture One will automatically retain the film sim. You can go change it, of course, so you don't have to leave it on these film sims, but they will retain the film sim that you used. So same thing here. Now you can see here he looks pretty flat. It looks pretty underexposed. So I'm really, and you could see again in our histogram, everything is smushed into the bottom, into the darks. All right, so we're going to really pull this up. And now this would be one where I might not move that at all because it's already crammed in there. But watch what happens if we pump up the contrast and then do the same thing, shadows. See that? Blacks. I'm going to pull the blacks down. Check it out. Pull the shadows up. And here I actually might want even more in the highlights, but you're not going to, the better way to do that is just with the exposure. So I might just bring it up just a touch because I want a little more pop in the whites. And then if you keep adding contrast, it's going to pop even more. Crush this just a touch. And then this is how I do it. It's kind of like, just moving these particular sliders around until I get it to a place where I feel like, okay, I like this. This looks good. And here we go. Here's your before. And now with this, you can see very clearly that the before image is really flat. Look in the background, right? It's very gray and everything is very flat. And then with my tweak, check that out. It really popped. And I might even go a little bit more on this one. So I might even bring that contrast up and really get it to pop a little bit more. I like that. I like it when it pops. I like it when it really stands out. Check it out. There you go. And there's no one way to do this, but this is what I like to do. All right, I'll show you one more and then we'll wrap it up. Here's a tree, a lonely little tree by the water. Now here you could see my exposure is a little bit more even. It's still slightly under because there's no information on the right side of my histogram, but it's definitely more flat across the board. So we're going to do the same thing. We'll start with these blacks, pull them in. Even if I just do that, like I'm happy even just leaving it like that. Check it out. Like there's not a lot of drama. See what we did? But I'm going to go a little bit more. We'll pull that in a little. I want a little pop in the sky. And then this is usually my move. I'm going to pull the shadows out like I showed you and then pull the blacks down. And then here I'm going to play with the sky a little bit. Let's see if we can get, like here I like the sky there. And then we'll just do a little bit of contrast. And that's maybe too much. Let's bring it back a little. Bring this back a little. Obviously the risk you run is then you just crush the blacks and it looks a little, I don't know, just not as nice. And for this image particularly, I like a little bit more, like I don't like it as much like this because now it's even. from, you know what I mean, from top to bottom. So I'm actually going to leave the shadows in there and only just pull them out ever so slightly, because now you really see a contrast between the whites and the blacks in the image. So, oops, sorry. I don't know what I did there. I hit that by accident. Let's do that again. And now here's your before and here's your after. Right? And I didn't do a lot here, but I just gave it, look at the pop in the blacks. Just a little bit. And that's it. Okay, well, that's all I wanted to tell you today. This is my Acros film sim hack, and I do this all the time. So a lot of my photos that you see, I've done little tweaks like this. Now, the beauty of using Acros is that the black and whites are beautiful right out of camera. And so lots of times, like I said at the beginning of the video, I don't do anything to them, but it's really cool to be able to just do this little tiny tweak to them. That's not hard to do. You just play with a couple of sliders and you can really dial it in, bring the drama to where it's at another level. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that this is something that you guys can use in your own shooting and find it to be something that improves the quality of your images. And if so, let me know. Let me know. Leave me a comment. Once again, I implore you to subscribe to the channel. So many of you are watching my videos. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. But you need to also hit that subscribe button, and then you'll never miss when I do another fun video like this. You can gently press that like button. There is no need to smash it. Make sure that you leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know how you process your images when you shoot in a film sim, or if you do it all. And that's all I have for you today. Visit my sponsor, B&H Photo. B&H is really a great friend to small content creators and small YouTubers like me. So give them a visit. If you're looking to purchase something, get it from them. They are the best camera store in the world. And that's it for today. Here's wishing you an awesome day, everyone. Go out, take some really cool pictures. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.